Hello everyone. In this talk, I will present my research on bypassing PQC signature verification with fault injection, Dilithium, XMSS, and Sphinx Plus. So my name is Fikret Garipay. I work as security engineer at Keysight Device Security Testing, formerly known as Riscure. And I'm highly interested about software exploitation and hardware attacks. And you can reach me on Twitter. So today I will start with introduction to post-quantum cryptography and how it changes the things. And then I will talk about our PQC target implementation. And I will also briefly introduce the voltage fault injection in practice. So even you don't have background in post-quantum cryptography or the fault injection, I will cover everything necessary. Then I will continue on fault injection attacks on Dilithium verification and fault injection attacks on Volts Plus in XMSS and Sphinx Plus. And I will also show fault injection on the fault resistance XMSS library, and we will wrap up. So let's start with introduction to PQC. The quantum computers aren't breaking crypto yet. They are not that powerful. However, the shift is underway, and now the standards are changing. Vendors are working on their PQC implementations, and we start to see this implementation at different devices. And PQC is going to replace RSA and ECC in the secure boot, firmware signing, and more. So very soon, they will be everywhere, starting your smart card to up to your smartphone. And that makes PQC fresh attack surface to us because everything is new. So in this table, you can see the four main signature schemes. The Dilithium and the Sphinx Plus is already standardized by the NIST. And the Dilithium is required for all digital signatures by the CNSA framework. And however, the Sphinx Plus is not approved for any use in national security systems by the CNSA framework. I don't know the reason. It could be maybe they know a security attack that we don't know yet, or it could be performance issues, but I'm not sure about the reason. And the other two schemes are LMS and XMSS, and these are still in draft at NIST standard. And however, they are already standardized by the ISO, and they are approved for the firmware and software signing by CNSA framework. So as I said, now multiple vendors offering their PQC solutions for the firmware update, secure boot, and signature verification. For example, OpenTitan, which is project also supported by Google, is using Sphinx Plus for the PQC secure boot. And in here, you can see the development board. And according to their statement, they will start to use at Chromebooks and data centers soon. And Calibra is open source root of trust design, is supported by the multiple hyperscalers. And now the Calibra 2.0 is adding the PQC secure boot with Dilithium and Kyber. So for the making the attacks real, we reviewed dozens of papers about attacking the PQC verification. And we only focus on practical attacks against the PQC signature verification. And the only problem at the time that we started the research, the public PQC targets aren't there. So to solve this issue, we ported public PQC libraries to bare metal firmware, and we attacked that device. And let's talk about how we did it. So for the target device, we selected ARM Cortex-M4. And for the libraries, we used PKM4 for the Dilithium. And it's a PQC library specially optimized for the ARM Cortex-M4. And the XMSS and Sphinx Plus isn't supported by the PKM4 framework because of the performance issues. So we used their reference libraries. And for our FI focus, since these libraries didn't written for the fault injection resistance, we only consider cryptographic logic as threat, and we only attack the cryptographic logic. So we didn't consider generic fault injection bypasses like mem-compare, skips, or forced returns as a threat, because we already expect that secure vendors know how to handle this against the fault injection. So for the device, the firmware is running on the STM32F4, and it's a bare metal firmware. And in big main loop, it has different cases. And in these different cases, you can call the different software and hardware implementations. For example, in here, you can see the Dilithium verification case, which is getting the input from the computer, then it's rising the trigger, calling the verify function, and it's following the trigger. And this is almost same with the secure boot or the firmware update cases in the real world, because even we don't have the triggers in the real world devices, we can use the reset points or power traces as triggers, so this will not be a problem for us. And let's also introduce the voltage fault injection. So for the voltage fault injection, you have to lower the voltage at the right time to trigger the faults. And this should be not too soft or not too hard. For example, if you set glitch length to too narrow or absolute glitch to too close to actual voltage, then you will see no change in the firmware execution, which we represent with the green color. So firmware will just continue its normal execution. Or if you set glitch length to too wide or absolute glitch to too low, then it becomes predictable change. Its target is either going to be mute or reset, which is also not interesting. However, if you can find the exact parameters between these 2 points, then you will see some interesting changes. And for the effects on the device, sometimes or most of the times nothing happens, which is usually the normal behavior. Or sometimes is device resets, stop working, or dies. This could be interesting. Maybe we trigger a security mechanism. This is why it stopped working. Or it just maybe it's just mute reset condition. However, if we can find the exact parameters, then we start to see change in the software decision, a computational fault, which may compromise the device, depends on the hardware and the software. And in here, you can see our setup. So we are communicating target over the serial port with our computer. And for controlling the target with reset and getting the trigger, we are using FPGA, which also provides precise timing. And we are also controlling the programmable power source with FPGA, which is introducing the faults to the device. And we are using oscilloscope to monitor all this process. And in here, you can see how this setup looks on the real world. FPGA and the FPGA is connected to the device and power supply is also giving the power to the device and also introducing the faults. And all this process is monitored with an oscilloscope. So since we handle the basics, let's start with fault injection attacks on the Dilithium verification. So the Dilithium is a lattice-based digital signature scheme designed against quantum attacks, and it offers 3 security levels, which are Dilithium 2, 3, and 5. And it supports deterministic and randomized signing. However, the randomized signing is selected for the standard, so in the real world, you will interface with the randomized signing on the devices. And it optimized using the NTT for an efficiency. And let's start with the K generation. So in the K generation, first is starting the expanding matrix A from the public seed, and then is sampling the secret vectors, and is using the secret vectors to calculate the value of the T, and then it's splitting this T into higher and the lower part, and the higher part goes to the public K, so public K consists of matrix A and the high part of T, and lower part goes to the secret K, so secret K consists of matrix A, secret vectors, and lower part of T. So in here you can see the Dilithium signing, And the signing uses a rejection sampling loop, which is starting with the sampling I, and then it's computing challenge C with the value of the W1 and the message. And then it's computing the Z vector using these values, and it verifies its constraints. So, and since the verifier doesn't know T0 because it's a secret, it's a part of the secret key, it creates a hint vector which helps to recover W1 at the verification. And this is the end of the Dilithium signing, and Dilithium signature consists of challenge, Z vector, and hint vector. So let's come to the most important part for us, which is the verification. The verification is pretty simple. It's starting with the calculating the value of the AZ minus C21 to the power of D, and then it's correcting this result with the hint vector, and it's recomputing the W1 and challenge C from the message. And if challenge C is the same with the signature, and if other security properties are correct, this means signature is valid, otherwise it's not a valid signature. So for the fault attacks on the Dilithium verification, this research is built on the fault attack sensitivity of public parameters in the Dilithium verification. And let's say remember the verification line 1. And so this paper shows how to recover W1 using only the public inputs. And it demonstrates how to constrain C21 to the power of D, so it will minimally affect the high bits of the AZ. And using this primitive, it presents two signature verification attacks with fault injection to exploit verification with fault injection. So let's check these attacks. Attack 1 is setting the value of the C21 to the power of D to 0 at the verification with fault injection. And if you can do this, then a signature generated using only public values will be accepted as valid by the device. And the second attack is setting the value of the C21 to the power of D smaller than the gamma 2. And if you can do this, also a signature generated using only public values will accept as valid. So basically, with the fault injection, we are getting rid of the secret part at the calculation in the verification, and then it's accepting our signature. So for before starting attacks, we have to construct these signatures, and paper presents two different signature generation algorithms. And for easier implementation, we modify these algorithms a little bit. And in here, you can see the signature generation algorithm for attack 1, which you can use to sign your arbitrary message with public key. And then, if you can set the value of the C21 to the power of D to 0 at the verification, then it will accept your signature as correct, because it will calculate the same challenge. And same for attack 2, we modify a little bit. And you can use this generation algorithm for sign your arbitrary message with a public key. And then if you can set the value of the C21 to the power of D smaller than the gamma 2 at the verification with false, then it will also accept your signature as valid. So let's check where we can target at the verification. So we are only going to target the calculation of the AZ minus C21 to the power of D. And to do this, we have 4 different scenarios to attacking this software library. And first scenario is attacking the unpacking of the public key. And if we can skip the unpacking of the public key, then the value of the C21 to the power of D will be equal to 0, which enables attack 1. And the second scenario is attacking the sampling of the challenge. And if we can skip it, the value of the C21 to the power of D will be equal to 0, which also enables attack 1. And for the scenario 3, we can also attack the shift by D process. And in the original, D is equal to 13, so it's shifting 13, it's shifted 13. And if we can set this value lower than 4, or if we can skip the whole shifting process, then the value of the C21 to the power of D will become smaller than the gamma 2, which enables attack 2. And for the last, even we cannot change anything of the calculation of this value, with false, maybe those points are already secure, we can still attack the subtraction. And if we can skip it, it will never subtract the C21 to the power of t from the AZ, which also the same effect with the setting this value to 0, which enables attack 1. And this is our attacking map to dilithium verification. So for how to target, first you have to choose your fault injection points with one of these scenarios or even more scenario based on the implementation. And then you can sign arbitrary message with a public key using these algorithms. And then you can start to inject the faults to the device during the verification. And let's check the fault injection results. So for the sampling of the challenge, the verification function calls the polychallenge function. And the polychallenge function, in the first for loop, it's first setting all coefficients to 0. And then in the second for loop, it's actually overwriting these coefficients. So what we can do in here, we can attack the second for loop with fault injection to skip this for loop completely. And if we can do this, the coefficients of challenge will remain as 0. It will never overwritten. And then the value of the C21 to the power of t will equal to 0. And in here, you can see our fault injection plot with glitch length and glitch voltage. The green represents the normal execution, which device returns the signature is not valid for our signature. And the yellow represents the mute reset condition, which device is either going to stop or stop responding. And the red points are representing the success points, which is accepted our signature as valid. And as you can see, we successfully bypassed the dilithium verification using this scenario. So for the shift YD, the verification function calls the polyvec shift-L function to shifting value of T1. And in the for loop, it calls the polyshift-L function, and polyshift-L function is actually shifting values. So what we can do in here, we can inject a fault at the for loop to skip this for loop completely. And if we can do this, it will never call the polyshift-L function, so it will never shift these values. And as a result, the value of the C21 to the power of t will be smaller than the gamma 2, which enables attack 2. And as you can see, we also successfully bypassed the dilithium verification using this scenario. So for the latest scenario, the verification function, after calculating the value, is calling the polyvec subfunction to subtract from the AZ. And in this function, in a for loop, it calls the poly subfunction, and poly subfunction is subtracting this value from the AZ. And what we can do, we can skip this for loop with fault injection to completely. And if we can do this, it will never call the poly subfunction. And as a result, it will never subtract the C21 to the power of t from the AZ, and it will only use AZ for the verification, which also enables attack 1. And as you can see, we also successfully bypassed the dilithium verification using this scenario. So for the summary of the fault injection on the dilithium, the fault injection on dilithium can target different verification operations like initialization, challenge generation, shifting, or subtraction, or even more based on the different software implementations or different mixed implementations. And as a result, these faults are allowing bypassing the scheme logic and is accepting attacker-generated signatures, which only public key is required to generate the signatures. And the attack surface is pretty huge, and there are a lot of things that can go wrong at the dilithium verification. So you have to check a lot of stuff to ensure that everything goes correct, which makes fault resistance hard to generalize in the dilithium verification. So since we handled this, let's continue with the bypassing WASP+ hash-based signature verification with fault injection. So the hash-based cryptography is built on the cryptographic hash functions rather than relying hard-marked problems. And since quantum computers are struggling to break these hash functions, these schemes are remaining resistant. And hash-based signatures are complex. So in this talk, we are only going to focus on their fundamental block, which is Winternitz one-time signature. And it's also the mechanism that we are going to attack. So in here, you can see a simplified Waltz tree with Winternitz parameter 4, and hash chain length is Winternitz parameter -1, which is 3, and chunk bit size is 2. So for the signing, first we are splitting the message hash into message hash chunks. And for our simplified Waltz tree, we are going to split message hash into 4 chunks. And then for the signing, we are hashing the secret chunk with the value of the message chunk. For example, at the first hash chain, the message chunk value is 2, so we are hashing the secret chunk 2 times, and then it's reaching the signature state. And for example, at the second hash chain, we are hashing 1 times because message chunk is 1, and so on. And this is the end of the Waltz signing, and now our signature is ready. And for the verification, Waltz starting at the where it's left out at the signing. For example, at the first hash chain, it's hashed 2 times at the signing. So in the verification, it's hashing 1 more time since the hash chain length is 3. Then it's reaching the public key state. And for example, at the second hash chain, it's hashed 1 time at the signing. So it's hashing 2 more times at the verification. And then it's compressing these values to calculate the actual public key. And if this public key is the same public key with the stored on the device, then you are good to go and signature is valid. Otherwise, it's not a valid signature. However, this is not secure. And you can use brute force to forge Waltz signatures. So if you can find arbitrary message digits with a brute force to hash of your arbitrary message is each chunk is greater or original, greater or equal to original chunks, then you can forge a valid signature. And after the brute force search, if you can find that message digits, it's pretty easy. For example, to change the value of the 01 to 10, you can just parse the signature and hash 1 more time. And then your forged signature is ready. And if you give this forged signature to the device, then it will also calculate the same correct public key, and device will accept this as valid. So this is bad. And to solve this issue, we are using Waltz with adding checksum, which called Waltz Plus. And in here we added like in this Waltz tree, you can see now we have 2 more hash chains, which are the checksum hash chains. And the checksum mechanism is pretty simple. It's just summing the remaining hash chains. And for example, in here, the remaining hash chains is equal to 6. And then it's dividing this value into checksum chunk values. And it's also hashing the secret key chunk with this checksum chunk value. And this solves the forgery problem, because in here you can see the Waltz tree, and if we try to forge this Waltz tree with changing the value 01 to 10, what we are doing, we are also decreasing the remaining hash chains at the verification. So like checksum is needs to be smaller. For example, since we hashed it 1 time, now it needs to be 5 instead of the 6. However, we only have the checksum chunks for the bigger values. And since hash is only one-way function, you cannot go back. Now you cannot forge the signature anymore. And this is the point that we are going to attack. So this research is built on the faulting Winternitz one-time signature to forge LMS, XMSS, or Sphinx Plus signatures. And this paper demonstrates on attack to checksum calculation during the verification to decrease the checksum with fault injection. And to do so, it presents 2 different attacks, which is partial hash chain skip and full hash chain skip. And in here, you can see the partial hash chain skip scenario with a forged signature with 10 instead of 01. And now what we can do, we can attack the checksum chunk with partial hash chain. And since we increase it once, so since we decrease it one, if we can skip that hash operation, then it will also calculate the same public key, and it will accept our forged signature as correct. And at the full hash chain skip, like if we forge it as many times as the remaining hash chain value, what we can do, we can skip the full hash chain at the verification, and it will also calculate the correct public key. Or maybe like our brute forcer is give us result that you only have to like forge once, but we have full hash chain skip with fault injection. What we can do, we can also parse the checksum chunk and like hash it few more times and to create forged signature. And then if you apply to full hash chain skip, it will also calculate the correct public key, and it will accept your forged signature as correct. And for the XMSS and the Sphinx Plus, the XMSS is a stateful hash-based signature scheme built on the WOS Plus and Merkle tree, and it requires a tracking secret index to avoid key reuse. And this is why it's recommended for the firmware signing and verification, because it's fast, but you have to keep track of that secret index, otherwise things will go wrong. Or you can use the Sphinx Plus, which is stateless hash-based scheme that combines the force and hypertree of XMSS instances. And using this, it eliminates the state management. However, this comes with price, which affects the size and speed. So for the code review of the WOS Plus in the XMSS implementation, we have two different attack points in the WOS public key from the signature function. First, we can attack the chain length function to checksum calculation, to decrease the checksum calculation. Or what we can do, we can also attack the generate chain function at the checksum chunk to perform partial hash chain skip or full hash chain skip. And in here, you can see the chain length function, which is calling the WOS checksum function. And the WOS checksum function is computing the checksum and is converting this checksum to base W value. So what we can do in here, we can attack all this calculation or converting with a fault injection. And if we can decrease the checksum value to our intended checksum value, then we can, device will accept the forged signature as valid. Or we can also attack the generate chain function, which is easy to attack. And in here, first is copying the input to the output, and then is hashing this output with the hash chain. So what you can do in here, you can attack the for loop with partial or full hash chain skip. For the partial hash chain skip, let's say like this for loop is hashing your checksum chunk 5 times. If you can like attack with fault injection to hash 4 or 3, then it performs like it creates a partial hash chain skip. And if that's intended value, it will accept your signature as correct. Or what you can do, you can skip this for loop completely, so it will never hash your checksum chunk input, and then it will also accept your forged signature. And for the Sphinx Plus reuse the same WOS Plus code as the XMSS for signature verification. Every line is same. And as a result, all fault injection attacks demonstrate against the XMSS is also applied to Sphinx Plus. And for how to target, first you have to choose your fault injection point, and then you have to start a brute force search for your arbitrary message. For example, after embedding malicious code to firmware, then you can start to change or like add bytes to the firmware as long as the firmware execution will not break, to change the hash of the firmware, and then you can check that hash is greater or equal to original hash, and this takes some time. For the single tree XMSS, it can even take up to 32 GPU years, which is a lot. However, for the multi-tree XMSS and Sphinx Plus, it is doable under 1 hour with high-end GPU. And after, if you can find that hash digest, you can easily forge a signature for your arbitrary message, and then you can start to inject the faults at the target during the verification. And let's check the fault injection results. So we attack the skipping hash chains, and we attack with skipping hash chains to the verification with voltage fault injection. And we also successfully bypass the XMSS verification using this scenario. So for the summary, we identify multiple fault injection targets in the VOS Plus, which is used both in XMSS and the Sphinx Plus. And the checksum calculation is broad and critical target. And skipping hash chains is easy and is easily doable with voltage fault injection. Attacking the checksum calculation and changing that checksum calculation to the exact value that you want will require precise local fault injection techniques such as laser fault injection or EMFI. And since Sphinx Plus reused the same VOS Plus code, all attack techniques against the XMSS verification is also applied to Sphinx Plus. And let's check the bonus content, which is fault injection on fault resistance XMSS library. So until now, we only attacked the public libraries that didn't written for the fault injection resistance. And this library is written for the fault injection resistance. So what this means, they are using the hardened mem compare, so you can just not skip with single fault. They are checking a lot of things multiple times, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 times to ensure you cannot bypass with single fault. And they are also checking the return values and everything. So the Fox crypto released their XMSS before the fault injection attacks on VOS Plus is published. And this library is including fault injection resistance for the verification as stated in their documentation. So our goal is apply to same attack on the VOS Plus on this library. And to do so, we implemented their library on our target. And we used the same voltage fault injection setup from our earlier research. And for the in here, you can see their chain function. And the partial hash chain skip is not possible with a single fault because even you change the value of the start index at the 1, then you have to apply another fault to second assert. Or if you attack the for loop with partial hash chain skip to hash less, then the value of the 1 and 4 will not be equal. And in the later part of the firmware, it will cache this and it will return false. However, if you can skip this for loop completely with fault injection, you will, it will never affect any check at the later part of the code, and it will accept the forger's signature with full hash chain skip. And in here, we are going to attack this for loop with full hash chain skip. And we are going to skip this for loop completely with fault injection. And as you can see in here, we also successfully bypass their XMSS implementation using the voltage fault injection. So since we are running out of time, I will skip the vulnerability disclosure and timeline. And if you're interested, you can check after the presentation. And let's wrap the talk with key takeaways and conclusions. So even the quantum safe code can be glitched, and PQC is not immune to fault injection techniques that we developed so far. And signature forgery, or like genetic signatures, is possible without the breaking crypto, just by skipping the checks, attacking the initialization values, or attacking the math part of the calculations. And in future, there will be even more new fault injection techniques against these schemes. And so you have to design something that you can update, because like if you design something that you cannot update on the production, and even you secure against all known attacks, maybe in the future there's a new attack will emerge, that can bypass easily, like the Fox crypto case, and then your product will remain vulnerable to that attack. And if hardware security is important for your products, such as the smart cards, smartphones, or like game consoles, this is bad. So this is a point that you have to consider at your design. And this makes implementation security next battleground for the post-quantum cryptography. So thanks for listening. And now I can answer your questions. And after the talk, I will also be in the wrap room, so I will also continue to answer your questions at there. So thanks for listening.